I borrowed this film from the library on a whim, wanting a feel-good mainstream film to watch for some easy Friday night viewing, remembering that it stirred quite a few hearts back when it was released in 2017. It turned a rather tidy profit of $305 million worldwide from a relatively modest budget of $20 million, with word of mouth filling cinemas throughout its run and the family film selling point pricking up parents' ears as well as children's. I love this film for its really humble narrative. It follows Augie Pullman, a young boy with Treacher-Collins syndrome who's been homeschooled by his mum his whole life, navigate his first year at a mainstream middle school. Diverting away from the classic Hollywood storytelling formula, the film tells the story from several perspectives, of Augie himself but also members of his peer group and family. I thought this was an interesting vehicle for telling the story as it completely changes the takeaway the audience are left with, leaving the actual content of the story aside for a moment. By shifting voices and perspective, the film refrains from demanding empathy and emotional engagement for the challenges just one character faces, rather acknowledging them alongside everyone else's, even when we've previously judged them for appearing like one thing on the surface from the central character's perspective. We're literally placed in other individuals' shoes to get a glimpse of the life struggles they're dealing with, a moment after judging them for not showing empathy towards Augie, suggesting perhaps that empathy is a two-way street, no matter how different you are or how hard you've got it. It's refreshing that Augie is an imperfect character and not simply a walking talking billboard for his disability. Too often representation is merely tokenistic, clearly being crafted with zero consultation with the relevant community and individuals with the said disability. I did some research into whether an actor with Treacher-Collins syndrome was considered for the role of Augie, and to my surprise, because it still rarely happens, they came very close to doing so. Ultimately, that actor didn't have a whole lot of experience and supposedly actually came to set during production, which led the dad to say to producers that thank goodness they didn't cast his son, as it would have been too much for them. Which does just speak to the broader representation issues within Hollywood. They might make one blockbuster film with one lead role for someone with such facial differences, but if that role is literally the only one available to that pool of actors, then of course, how do you expect that actor to feel confident and experienced enough to take on the role and do it justice? But that aside, it is fab that a story of a boy with Treacher-Collins syndrome did hit the mainstream with this film, even if it is considerably flawed, because at least on some level, individuals and families for whom this is a reality can attend it because this film was pretty much available worldwide and see at least some portion of their reality reflected back at them, which is powerful stuff. It's hard enough to find the time, energy, and resources to get to a mainstream cinema for some families, let alone a screening to perhaps an obscure film at a film festival. So even if this film paints an airbrushed, sanitized version of living with facial differences, it is a big step. One of those major sanitized elements, though, is how it doesn't suggest for a moment that Augie's endless surgeries and hospital stays have put any sort of financial pressure on the Pullman family. The dad appears to make it home in time for dinner each night, while being the sole breadwinner, hinting at the considerably stable financial position of their family. Their financial flexibility is also evident in Augie having the option to be homeschooled in the first place, a detail that probably is the tip of the iceberg in how accurately the economic, medical, and emotional realities of such a condition are portrayed in this film. The narrative is about Augie learning to step out into the big wide world of mainstream school, socialise with more people than he's probably ever been around, and stand up for himself where bullies are concerned. Perhaps to mainstream audiences, nothing enormously consequential happens, except that it does. Augie lets go of wanting to wear his space helmet everywhere, and maybe for the first time has someone around after school for a play date, and through seeing the reaction of his parents when these things happen, they're given the weight which they deserve. The story follows this next big challenge in Augie's life, while making an effort to give voice to everyone around him, their personal sacrifices, shelved ambitions, and identity. This is an incredibly common reality for parents, and especially mothers, of children with special needs. It definitely made me think of people in my life for whom this is ludicrously true. And if you don't know someone for whom this is the case, then may I push a podcast called Two Peas in a Podcast, which is by two Melbourne-based mums of premature twins with disabilities and special needs. It's really honest, raw, human, cuts out the crap, and is filled with incredibly needed voices and stories on this topic. While 12-year-olds engaging in hallway fistfights had me eye-rolling, the overall gentler version of masculinity on display in Wonder is really refreshing. Augie comforting his dad after their dog passes away, which felt like a Marley and Me flashback, as well as his schoolmates comforting him on camp. I don't know, pre-teen boys having a teary moment together by a lake. Kind of felt a little groundbreaking in this really mainstream film. I read a scathing review of this film that said it had the emotional depth of a fridge magnet. Lol. Look, I don't really agree. It made me cry and I felt for the characters, although I acknowledge that was after I swallowed the fact that this film is very glossy. Empathy is the real hero in this story, as is the shared narration, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, but big cast films are just generally better. Now, I did have a chuckle when looking out for the food in this film. Meatloaf. Again. There are just so many American films where this family dinner dish appears. The Incredibles being a well-known one your mind may wander to.
I'm not hungry for meatloaf.
Anywho, I hadn't until now made a recipe for such a dish, so here it is, in wonder but vegan.
Set sail, catch the wind, taking a chance.
So to make this meatloaf honey bunches, you want to start off by toasting some nuts in a dry fry pan. I used a mixture of cashews, almonds, pecans, walnuts, Brazil, and some sunflower seeds. There might have been a pesky almond in there too. It's very flexible which nuts you use, so don't stress if, I don't know, your ratio of nuts looks slightly different. Toss them in a dry fry pan until, on average, a couple of sides of each nut has got a bit of colour on it. Take that off the heat, set it aside to cool, and while it's slightly cooling, crush the heck out of some garlic and chop an onion. Deeelish, by which point your nuts shall not be scorching hot. You could either bash them with a rolling pin, I suppose, or suppose, or just blitz them in a food processor if you have access to one until they're resembling like very coarse sand, like small chocolate chip size. That's a good description. Yeah. So then, what do you want to do? You want to chop some mushrooms, add them to the onion and garlic, which is slightly softened halfway there. Add the mushrooms, get it all the way there. They'll release their juices, shrink in size. Then you want to add a starch, which helps to bind this vegan meatloaf. I use pumpkin, but you could use potato or sweet potato. Then add some stock to the pan, not too much, cover, and let it steam away until softened. Won't take as long as you think it does. Maybe like 5 minutes max. Semi-squash that with a utensil, then use the frying pan as like a mixing bowl. That's what I did, but you do you. Add your nuts back, some herbs, there's like paprika, Italian herbs, thyme in there, all the good stuff, some Dijon mustard, some tomato sauce or ketchup is what I'm referring to. Was there something else I'm missing? Can't remember. Anyway, the full recipe's on my blog. Then mix that all together until it's looking quite pasty. Add breadcrumbs, either normal or gluten-free ones. This is a very easy recipe to make gluten-free. Oh yeah, flaxseed was in there, but I didn't make a flax egg. I just added it dry to the mix because I find a flax egg can set too much and then it's so congealed that it's hard to evenly mix through the mixture. So yeah, press that into a loaf tin. I drizzled it with some garlic oil and baked in the oven. Pretty simple stuff. I let that sit for probably about 10 minutes. And there's also some rosemary in there too. Look, I'm editing this a beat after filming, so quality voiceover happening. Anyway, yes, it's delicious, and serve it with like gravy or cranberry sauce as a suggestion. I hope that was a practical and genuinely helpful recipe, honey bunches. The thing with vegan meatloaf is because there are nuts in it, it is on the richer side, more filling side, maybe making it something you want to save for Christmas Day or a more special occasion, or a midweek thing. You do you, but I hope people who often struggle with constructing like a menu plan because they're used to doing it with a sort of roast and, your side dishes, this recipe is particularly helpful because it's a good swap for that. Pop on the gravy, keep your side dishes, but maybe make them with plants, and when you put that down in front of someone, they will recognise it as I know what this is. It's not too far from what I'm used to, but it's with plants and equally, if more so, delicious. If you try it out, do let me know on Instagram, follow me there for more foodie content in between videos. Hopefully I'll see you around in another video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you super soon. Bye!